Before dawn, Nashville was not quiet. It was under siege. Helicopters moved low through the cloud deck, their white beams slicing fog while sirens tore across the streets. Blocks that had been asleep 5 minutes earlier detonated into violence and light. Steel doors were broken. Flashbangs punched through silence. Heavily armed teams flooded neighborhoods in full kit. From the sky, it did not look like routine policing. It looked like a city in active combat. By sunrise, officials confirmed 17 arrests across Tennessee, California, and Oklahoma. At first you hear that and it sounds like a normal drug sweep. But this was not a street case. This was the end of a 9-month federal operation targeting a command network that behaved like an organized military supply chain. People in Nashville saw something they do not normally see in the United States. Black armored vehicles rolling quiet and deliberate through residential streets. Floodlights lighting up driveways. Suspects pulled out in wrist restraints and moved fast under escort. Officials would not talk on camera. They would not release full names. But one critical piece still got out. The network at the center of this operation is tied to MS-13. That matters because MS-13 is not random chaos. It is order, discipline, hierarchy, logistics. Inside the raided sites, the scene did not look like a dirty trap house. It looked like industry. Crates of cocaine, crates of marijuana, counterfeit pills stacked in bulk for resale, THC vape products by the case, psilocybin liquids ready for shipment, cash bundles packed in steel lockers, rifles lined up along concrete walls. The initial estimate on seized narcotics, weapons, and physical currency approached $500 million. That is not neighborhood money. That is logistics scale. That is infrastructure. Understand what that means. Nashville woke up inside a live battle space. If this was not war, what would you call it? Because what you saw in those streets was not the start of something. It was the end. That morning was the last strike in a silent campaign that had been running inside this country for 9 straight months. Go back 9 months. On the surface, Nashville looked normal. Families on porches, delivery trucks running their routes. Warehouse lights on at 5 a.m. like always. But inside a DEA office, analysts were already staring at something that did not feel like normal crime. Random phone intercepts. Truck manifests that did not match what was inside the truck. Money deposits hitting accounts on a perfect schedule and vanishing just as fast. The pattern was too clean, too structured, too rehearsed. They built a picture. Piece by piece, they started mapping the machine. They watched delivery schedules and phone pings line up. They watched the same rental vehicles jump state lines and loop back into Tennessee. They watched money move through shell construction firms, fake produce exporters, courier services and labeling companies. Companies that existed on paper. Companies that filed forms. Companies that had bank accounts. Companies that were not real. The people running this operation did not act like gang members on a corner. They acted like logistics officers. Every person had one narrow job. Transport, storage, money, enforcement. No one was allowed to see the full picture. That split structure is not an accident. It is compartmentalization. It is built to block infiltration. It is built so that if one person talks, they can only take down a fingertip, not the arm. So law enforcement adapted. Quietly, patiently. Undercover buyers did not just buy drugs. They documented packaging. They photographed shipping labels. They watched how boxes were sealed, how pallets were wrapped, how paperwork traveled with cargo. Surveillance teams did not just sit on one house. They followed trucks across state lines, mapping drop locations, timing intervals, and safe houses. Forensic accountants tore into the money trail. Dozens of shell companies, fake invoices, fake maintenance bills, fake payroll, millions of dollars in cash cycling on a system. Friday deposits, Tuesday withdrawals, accounts empty by the end of the week. Cryptocurrency movements mixed in just enough to fog the view. And through all of it, operational security on the cartel side stayed aggressive. Burners swapped out weekly. Meeting spots changed with zero pattern. Rental fleets instead of owned plates. At one point, a routine local traffic stop almost blew the whole surveillance structure. After that near exposure, the teams on the government side went dark and even tighter. Fewer touches, fewer chances, absolute discipline. By late summer, everything started to lock into alignment. Analysts picked up encrypted chatter pointing to an incoming load. GPS tracks showed coordinated movement across 3 states, Tennessee, California, and Oklahoma, all timing in parallel like synchronized gears. That is when the task force realized this was not a loose distribution network. This was a command network. A joint strike package formed. DEA, FBI, ATF, ICE, United States Marshals. They worked out of a single command environment. Digital maps lit the walls. Target buildings were modeled room by room. Entry points were assigned. Exfil routes were assigned. Timelines were rehearsed down to the second. Communications were hardened with end-to-end encryption. Teams did not get full assignments until minutes before wheels up. Every corridor, every stairwell, every interior door had already been walked virtually before anyone touched it in real space. Then, surveillance confirmed what they were waiting for. Multiple tractor-trailers in motion. Loads moving, money moving. Command gave the green light. 4 a.m, Central Time. Helicopters lifted through a low ceiling. Ground convoys rolled from staging sites in all 3 states. Tactical teams hit final approach in total radio silence. Then, on the signal, every channel went live at once. The synchronized strike lasted under 5 minutes. In Nashville, armored vehicles sealed entire blocks, cutting escape lanes. Entry teams breached at opposite ends of the city at the exact same time. The first wave took 2 warehouses near the I-40 corridor. These locations were disguised as import businesses. Inside, packaging machines were still running. Digital counters were frozen mid-cycle. Crates were staged for shipment with labels from legitimate carriers. The content was not produce. It was compressed cocaine and counterfeit pharmaceuticals. A second wave rolled south of downtown and hit supposed residential addresses. On paper, they were just houses. In reality, they were hardened storage sites. Basements had been rebuilt with reinforced steel and poured concrete. Those basements held rifles, ammunition, high-capacity magazines, and stacks of cash sealed in plastic. Upstairs, on active terminals, investigators found accounts logged in and live. Those accounts were part of the traffic and payment system used to run the network. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Fresno and Tulsa, the exact same pattern repeated. Parallel raids struck matching facilities. Identical layouts, identical paperwork, identical barcodes. Ledgers in California matched ledgers in Tennessee. Ledger entries in Oklahoma pointed back to Nashville distribution points. This is how you confirm command and control. You do not guess. You map the repetition. By daylight, every active warrant had been executed. No early leaks, no warning, no runouts. 17 primary suspects in custody. Among them, regional distributors, financial controllers, field-level enforcers. The total take across all sites approached $500 million in narcotics. Weapons, ammunition, and cash. That number matters. Not only because of what was seized, but because of what it revealed. See, the weapons and the drugs are obvious. The shock is what was sitting on the hard drives. Inside those locations, agents seized encrypted devices, phones with no SIM cards, tablets that had been physically damaged, laptops that had been wiped. All of it was collected, cloned, and pushed into a secure federal analysis site outside Nashville. And this is where the story turns from raids on the street into a digital war. Rows of monitors came online. Analysts began tearing into the data. They pulled message logs. They pulled location trails. They pulled transaction codes. They reconstructed Bluetooth pairings. They correlated GPS pings. They mapped call metadata across 3 states. They aligned timestamps down to the second. What came out of that data was not guesswork. It was proof. Orders for routing. Orders for payment. Orders for enforcement. All of it pulsed outward from Nashville. Devices in Tennessee would light up first. Less than a minute later, paired devices in Oklahoma and California would light. That 1-minute gap repeated again and again and again. This is what command and control looks like in the 21st century. Not a war room full of flags. A cheap rented office suite with encrypted laptops and routers. Investigators tracked those network signals to one physical point. A fake logistics office about 3 miles from downtown Nashville. That location was not moving dope. That location was moving instructions. That office contained servers, routers, and encrypted workstations used to manage financial flows, assign drop points, and enforce timing discipline across states. In that room, federal agents found the heartbeat. Follow the money, and you see how the organism stayed alive. The cartel built fake companies, construction firms, import businesses, courier services, all registered, all invoicing, all pushing money. Millions of dollars moved through those firms like blood through arteries. The cycle repeated with machine regularity. Friday deposits land. Tuesday withdrawals strip the accounts. By the end of the week, balances hit zero. Nothing to seize, nothing to trace. Cryptocurrency traffic sat on top of that system as visual smoke. You need to understand why that is more dangerous than just guns. This empire did not survive because of violence. It survived because of accounting. The system was engineered to blend into the American economy, to live inside it, to use it as camouflage. Every truck had paperwork. Every warehouse had business cover. Every payment had an invoice. Every bank transfer had what looked like a lawful purpose. Even the physical layout of the warehouses was built to mimic legitimate freight operations. Pallets stacked in perfect lines. Crates labeled with fake barcodes. Conveyor belts tuned for high-speed intake and dispatch. You could walk someone through the floor and they could believe it was a normal logistics company. That is the point. Deception was multi-layered. Trucks ran under agricultural permits, listed as carrying organic produce. Beneath shrink wrap and packing foam sat narcotics. Paper logs and digital manifest did not match, but each on its own looked clean. Even a veteran inspector could read the paperwork and not see a crack. At this point, the federal teams understood that they were not just dismantling a drug ring. They were hitting a distributed command structure. A structure that acts more like an insurgent network than a street crew. A structure that could project control across state lines without needing one physical headquarters or one identifiable boss. The communication discipline confirmed it. Every operative used rotating SIM cards. Messages went out in short encrypted bursts that lasted seconds and then wiped. The language inside those bursts did not say deliver the load or make the payment. It talked about weather. It talked about holidays. It talked about family events. Harmless on the surface. Operational once decoded against the calendar and the route grid. Analysts built the chain of command like you build a map of a nervous system. They charted who pulsed first, who pulsed second, who confirmed receipt. They watched how money was authorized, how timing windows were enforced, and how enforcement orders moved to field enforcers who did not know the source. No names, only functions, finance, logistics, enforcement, relay. That separation insulated the upper structure. You could arrest muscle and never touch finance. You could seize product and never touch command. That is by design. That is why normal police work is not enough. This is where the mission stopped being purely local and was elevated to national threat. Within hours of the raid, federal leadership convened in Washington. This was now counter-network work. Cyber units were tasked to follow the digital nodes. Financial enforcement moved to freeze shell accounts. The Internal Revenue Service began tearing open years of false tax filings used to wash millions in plain sight. The financial crimes enforcement side began flagging suspicious wires that matched the Nashville pattern and kicked them to investigators. The United States Marshals moved on identified high-risk fugitives tied to the organization. The investigation reached beyond American borders. Through international channels, fragments of encryption pulled in Nashville were compared to known communication structures in Central America and Mexico. What came back confirmed what the teams already suspected. This was not just a local cell. This was a transnational web. Multiple regional command centers, shared playbook, shared timing discipline, shared accounting logic. Inside those briefings, one hard question landed on the table. How do you fight an enemy that hides inside your economy? You cannot treat this like a simple narcotics case anymore. Traditional laws were written for visible dealers, visible corners, visible stash houses. They were not written for a distributed system that launders millions through fake contracting firms, uses cloud infrastructure to issue orders, and hides high-grade narcotics under paperwork for organic produce. In Tennessee, after the dust, the fear did not vanish. Neighborhoods that had lived under cartel pressure stood in an uneasy quiet. Families looked out at armored vehicles still parked at intersections and asked themselves if this was safety or just an intermission. Federal checkpoints multiplied along major routes. Patrols stayed heavy. Task force teams did not pack up. They stayed embedded because everyone in that command center understood something the public is only starting to accept. You can take the head off a cell. You cannot assume the system is dead. Networks like this are modular. They are replaceable. They replicate. By the time the last evidence crates rolled out under escort, Nashville had become more than a crime scene. It had become a live study in modern conflict without uniforms. The raid did more than seize money and guns. It exposed the operating system behind a modern criminal empire. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The next version is already learning from this failure. Officials will stand up and call this a triumph, and in the tactical sense it absolutely was. 17 arrests. A command node neutralized. Nearly $500 million in narcotics, weapons, ammunition, and currency seized. That matters. That saves lives. That interrupts supply. That cuts money.